Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at the legendary, yet deeply conflicted playwright Bertolt Brecht. We often think we know exactly who he was, right? The ultimate theatrical revolutionary, the staunch Marxist, the guy who literally changed how we experience the stage forever. But today, we're unpacking a fascinating duality: the public mask he wore and the private man underneath.
The cracks in that mask really start to show in his 1942 poem, Hollywood Elegies. He writes, "Every morning, to earn my bread, I go to the market where lies are traded. In hope, I take my place amongst the sellers." Wow, that immediately establishes the dark, heavy mood of a man forced into exile. So while he was famous for his cold, objective plays, he was actually using his poetry as a secret emotional laboratory to process the profound tragedy of his own displacement.
And just picture the visual dissonance here. You've got this dark-suited, cigar-smoking, hypercritical Teutonic playwright standing out starkly against the relentless optimism of sunny Santa Monica in the 1940s. Surrounded by cheerful California beach culture, he's privately consumed by the grim reality of fleeing Nazi Germany.
So, here's our roadmap for today. 1. The writer in exile. 2. Breaking the illusion. 3. Mechanics of epic theater. 4. A feminist critique. And finally, 5. Warnings for today. We're traversing from historical biography into dramatic theory and then straight into a modern feminist critique.
Section 1. The writer in exile. By the time Brecht arrived in Los Angeles, he'd already been on the run for 8 years, and he was really struggling to make a living as a Hollywood screenwriter. His writing from this time shows a striking split. On one hand, you have his journals, which are just filled with venomous entries cursing the Americans for not recognizing his world-class talent. But in secret, the geographic distance created an overwhelming sense of survival guilt for him, resulting in deeply personal, pathos-laden poetry.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this intense divide between the mask and the man. His public theater was designed as a cold, scientific laboratory. It was this realm of self-conscious artifice, totally devoid of veiled autobiography. It completely masked the tortured, emotional human being underneath, who was desperately grappling with the burden of survival while the world was literally burning down around him.
But despite all that internal turmoil, Brecht's public mission remained razor-sharp. He desperately wanted to wake citizens out from their hypnotic, subconscious acceptance of the world. As he put it so perfectly in his famous play Galileo, just because things are the way they are doesn't mean they stay that way.
Section 2. Breaking the illusion. Let's see how he rebelled against traditional entertainment.
To wake people up, Brecht knew he had to completely break traditional theater. On one side, you have Aristotelian mimesis. This is basically reproducing reality to please the masses. It relies heavily on empathy, pity, and emotional purging, which Brecht believed ultimately left society docile. On the other side is his creation, Brechtian epic theater. It represents reality to provoke revolution. Instead of empathy, it uses alienation and astonishment to foster critical observation and drive social change. Brecht argued that empathy and fear actually ruin our ability to think critically. Think about it. If you're comfortably empathizing with a character or scared by their tragic downfall, you're just too hypnotized to challenge the social order. Epic theater replaces that comfortable empathy with jarring astonishment. By totally bypassing the emotions, he aimed to awaken the audience's political reasoning. He wanted an audience of critical experts, kind of like how fans actively analyze a sports game.
Section 3. Mechanics of epic theater. Let's demystify how this actually worked.
To understand how he achieved this critical thought mechanically, we really need to look at 3 key theatrical concepts. The first is Verfremdungseffekt, effect, or the alienation effect. Basically, this is the practice of turning the familiar and the ordinary into something peculiar and striking. By making the everyday look strange, it forces you, the audience, to take a step back and approach reality with the detached, analytical attitude of a social scientist. The second technique is Lehrstücke, which translates to learning play. But it's vital to know this wasn't some patronizing, prescriptive political lecture on Marxism. Not at all. It was an interactive, reciprocal tool. Actors and audiences engaged in dialectics together. The goal was cultivating independent, counter-orthodox thinking, rather than just passively sitting there receiving a message.
The third piece of the puzzle is gestus, or quotable actions. Now, instead of an actor completely embodying and becoming a character, they put a deliberate distance between themselves and the role. They use behavioral patterns and bodily movements that overtly reveal a character's socioeconomic class. Think of the exhausted, heavy walk of a tired construction worker. They are literally quoting a social condition with critical distance.
But you have to ask, what are the unintended consequences of this highly structured, emotionally detached system? Well, let's transition to a modern academic lens by introducing Saudet Bill-Jakoskin's thesis, which cross-examines these very techniques from a gender-oriented perspective.
Section 4. A feminist critique. What is the cost of this cold functionality?
So, what exactly is the true cost of Brecht's obsession with cold class-focused functionality? Feminist scholars point out that while his methods aimed to liberate the working class, they ended up trapping female characters. It's basically a highly logical four-step pipeline. First, epic theater functionalizes characters for political goals. Second, through this instrumentalism, female figures are desubjectified and often desexualized. Third, discarding all affect and emotion removes human nuance. And finally, this strict anti-emotion rule inadvertently results in the stereotyping of women.
Drawing on Judith Butler's theory of performativity and effect theory, this research reveals a massive blind spot. By completely bypassing emotion to focus purely on a class-based narrative, Brecht ironically encourages essentialist, normative judgments about women. The lack of emotion doesn't just alienate, it flattens these women into mere cogs for a Marxist critique.
The findings here highlight the central paradox of epic theater. It aims to prevent empathy to foster critical thought, yet it leaves intersectionality, the crossing of class and gender, completely unattended. This grotesque use of emotions treats characters purely as political instruments. Consequently, the overall impact runs the risk of rendering even strong, unconventional female characters completely stereotyped and objectified. This cold instrumentalism basically betrays the very liberation the theater supposedly champions.
Section 5. Warnings for today. Let's see how this builds to a personal tragedy.
This whole theme of betrayed ideals actually built into a deeply personal tragedy for Brecht himself. Back in 1947, he was called to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. And what happened? The passionate communist quickly denied his teachings just to save his own skin. The irony is incredibly cruel. Brecht was exactly mimicking the central character of his own play Galileo, mercilessly tossing his integrity aside before a modern inquisition.
And the human cost of this survival was profound. In a haunting poetic confession from his later years, Brecht wrote, "I know, of course, it's simply luck that I've survived so many friends, but last night in a dream I heard those friends say of me, 'survival of the fittest,' and I hated myself." Wow. That just reveals the tragic disgust he felt for his own uncanny knack at surviving and the deep, heavy guilt he carried for his inaction.
Brecht's life and work offer a stark warning that connects directly to our contemporary political realities. Our modern war on truth has historical predecessors. We can look at Brecht to understand the heavy burden of a tortured conscience, the guilt of enjoying comfort and contentment while the world around us literally burns, and the desperate, difficult need for personal integrity when it is most required.
Brecht's theatrical techniques were designed to force an audience out of complacency and into action. Yet his own life ended in despair over how little he actually did to fight the terrifying rise of authoritarianism. So the question remains, will we plead for leniency when the next generation judges us for our inactivity? Or will we look back at our lives, just like Brecht did, and ask ourselves why we didn't do more?